One of the most fun designs to do with an embroidery machine is an applique design. And this is going to show you how it's going to be stitched. And we're going to do design number 16. But this part right in here is not stitched. That's a piece of fabric. So if you want something really dramatic, we'll put a piece of fabric that matches the look that you're after. So let's go ahead and just look on screen. We just finished doing our little sun design. We're going to return back out of the stitch out view. Touch the trash can to touch and hold. That will delete all designs that's on the screen. Touch the start menu and go down to design number 16 and pull it up. Now, we don't want to stitch it right in the middle of our hoop because we already have a design kind of in there already. So I'm going to show you how we're going to make sure that we align it up and get it exactly where we want it to be. Go ahead and touch go. That will bring the embroidery arm back into position. Tell us which hoop to put on. Let's go ahead and slide the hoop into position. Touch the green check mark to confirm. Now let's just see, if we were to line this up to sew right in the center of the hoop, will we be okay, or are we going to stitch over that design back there? To find out, we're going to touch the design positioning button. That's the flower with the 4 arrows. This is going to be an area you're going to be in a lot. And we're going to trace around that outside perimeter. Touch the little arrow up into this top corner. Actually, here we go. We do need to be on to move the hoop around. So first picked out the design positioning where the hoop is going to move. So we're going to see, oh my goodness, so the needle is just barely hanging out inside this design. But look, is our flower going to stitch in that top corner? Technically not. So we'd be okay of finding just how big this flower is going to be. And we'll go ahead and go all the way around. Now if I want to make sure that that is exactly in the center of my hoop, touch the centering point and let's just see where that needle comes down. Okay, so it's just a little to the side, and that's more just based on how I hoop my fabric. I was just a little bit to the side. So I'm just moving it over and then up a little bit. Notice these are really small increments. You're going to need to hold your finger on them to really just tap it in place, and now I can see that I'm right where I want to be. Let's go ahead and just call that good so we can get into sewing this applique. So the first thing with an applique is just a outline stitch. It's a placement stitch. So it doesn't matter which color of thread you have on. It's going to go ahead and start to stitch just all the way around the design. So while that's doing it, let me show you what's going to happen next. Whenever there's a little asterisk, that indicates that you're going to be putting fabric over the first line, and then it's going to stitch again. So let's just go ahead. See? Just fine. We didn't touch that design at all. It's going to go ahead and stop. It's going to cut the thread. It's even going to tell me to change color, which we know we don't really need to do. Remember that thread is cut, so if you want, you can just get a hold of it, kind of swish it through. Sometimes I'll even use my little stylist like this and just kind of slide that out. And I'm going to lay my piece of fabric. I just need a piece of fabric that's going to cover all sides of that stitching line. And we're going to stitch it again. Push the start, count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Cuts my thread. And now we'll go all the way around the design. Normally, after stitching an applique down, it has you stop and trim. But on this particular design, notice that the scissor or trimming feature doesn't happen until between the 5th and 6th color. So we're going to follow the directions. I sure could trim it out right now, but look what it's going to do next. It's going to do the center first, and then it's going to do this detail and so forth. So it wants to not have this all trimmed out because sometimes that center stitching can pull away. So it's leaving it intact until we actually are doing that. And it's just the way the design was made. So let's just go ahead. Let's do some yellow thread, and we'll get this design stitching out the center of the flower. I've also switched over to the center Q-foot. I was just having a little trouble with my thread kind of breaking, and it's just going to solve all those issues. So I went ahead and switched that over, and now you're going to kind of see how it works. It has more of a little bit of a hopping solution and really helps hold those stitches down as it's being used. The sensor Q-foot is great too. When you start to get really thick nap towels, or even I remember doing like Christmas stockings, and that cuff was so thick inside the machine that The R foot just got maxed out, even just said kind of like machine overload. But once I switched over to the sensor Q foot, that also was taken care of. It's ready to stitch the last color, and this is where we were told to trim the embroidery applique. So one thing you can actually do, and I'm going to do, is take the hoop off. But if you just have something small to trim, if you touch the needle down function, that is called a trim position, and it slides the whole hoop towards you and lets you kind of get in here and actually do some trimming. So as I do the trimming, I'm using some curved embroidery scissors, and I'm pulling up on the fabric here and getting a really close trim. Now, since this is a completely all the way around, it is going to be easier for me to go ahead and take the hoop off and then be able to turn it as I go. Now, when you take the hoop off, you are still connected to this bobbin thread, so you will need to cut it. The machine doesn't know that you're going to take the thread off or the hoop off the machine. So just kind of get, just be aware of that. Sometimes I'll even set it underneath my foot, but most of the time I'd put it in my lap. The key is that you get a nice close stitch. So your scissors are key to this step of an applique. We want it close enough that when it goes to stitch the final satin stitch around the flower, that it's going to encompass all the raw edges. So if you don't get close enough, there's going to be some fabric that's going to stick out to the side here. All right, so I'm going to finish trimming. I'll show you it up close before I put it back onto the machine. See what I mean by close? We really want to get nice and close to that stitching. Remember, it went around this 2 times. So even if you end up clipping a little bit of the stitching, you're still going to be okay. So let me go ahead and slide this back underneath my machine. And if I want to just go ahead and touch the start stop button, remember we're in that trim position, it'll go ahead and move that back to where it needs to go and start sewing. You could have also gone ahead and touched the arrow up down button again, and that would have moved it back around. So I'll meet you back here when this is done, stitching around that beautiful edge to make the applique. Isn't this gorgeous? That's what you get when you have the perfectly cut applique. Everything is encased, and whatever color you want that flower to be, it's just amazing how quick and easy applique is to do.